Carmen, during that O.J. Simpson trial, it became apparent that Nicole Brown Simpson tried numerous times to get help, to get protection from the abuse that she was suffering. How has the public's awareness of domestic abuse changed since these murders 25 years ago?
What I want to say first is it is a familiar pattern for us that what Nicole was going through is something that we have seen women before and after continue to struggle with, right? Great effort put into safety planning and trying to get out of the situation. And many women are successful, and unfortunately some women do end up being murdered by the person, and we're working very vigilantly to ensure that we can do everything we can to prevent homicide. What I would say is different is there's much more conversation and understanding. We now have permission to speak about it in the public arena. I don't believe that was true in the same way. We have many more people who are educated about family violence, domestic violence, and I think less shame in talking about it.
Do you find that victims feel police take their complaints more seriously than they did years ago?
I do think that what has changed significantly is more partnership and coordination of services and more focus on lethality. We've gotten better at pieces of the work. What's still painful and heartbreaking is we still continue to have, a high rate of violence against women and a high rate of homicide. Already this year, anecdotally, I believe, we've had 10 homicides in the city of Milwaukee that have been related to domestic violence, and some of those have included children. So one homicide is too many. What I do think we've gotten better at, we've had this emerging research around lethality, and there's something called the LAP protocol, which has changed our work and our conversation with women in high-risk circumstances.
What is that protocol, Carmen?
Well, when an officer goes to the scene, there's a series of questions that they ask, and if a client screens high risk, when they call our hotline, they will let us know. And in our conversation, both the officer and the advocate will say to the client, women in your circumstance have a much higher likelihood of being murdered. And our clients have said, we've been doing that in Milwaukee, I believe, for 4 years. And then the prosecutor will also use the same language. And clients have said that it registers differently for them, right? So our conversation has changed. We are now able to say you're screening in high risk. Clients are hearing that differently. And we also have a high-risk team now that looks at individual cases on a weekly basis to see if there's something we can do to try to, prevent the homicide from happening. So,
what are some of the questions that investigators will ask a victim to find out if they're high risk or not?
I don't have the specific questions, but some of the things we look for are, is the abuser? Some of the things we look for, Libby, are: is the abuser employed? Have they ever? What's the nature of the threat? Have they held you against your will? Have they strangled you to the point of passing out? Those are sort of the nature of the questions that could indicate high lethality in a circumstance.
What sort of protections are available to victims under these circumstances?
I would say the same protections that we've always had: shelter, relocation, both into shelter living or somewhere where the abuser cannot have access to you. That's the main thrust behind shelter living, right? We want to prevent that person from having access to you. And there's a variety of ways that clients have said that's not practical for me. I cannot, I have a job, I have to take my kids to school, I have a sick relative I'm taking care of. So we're always in this safety planning conversation with clients saying, what's happening in your life and how can we plan for your safety in an evolving way. So we look at things such as, where are you living? Is it safe? Do you have security in place? Have you talked to your employer? What are the ways you get to and from work? Have you told people in your life about the threats? What are the ways that you're vulnerable? We try to reduce that vulnerability. If a client chooses, we help them work with law enforcement. to report the crime. We encourage our clients to keep records on what's happening, keep notes on what's happening, and work with an advocate who can help you navigate those complexities.
Carmen, if there's someone listening and they feel they need help, they need assistance, how can they call you?
I would say, first of all, what I would say to someone listening is, I really want you to know you're not alone and it's not your fault. Many of the things that are happening to you have led you to believe that there's something you're doing or not doing, but the reality is the violence in your life is not your fault, and there are people here to help you. And the first step is find somebody who's safe in your life, or call our hotline, which is 414-933-2722. Look for someone you can speak to. Violence happens because of isolation in people's lives, and batterers count on that isolation. So the more we can do as a community to break that isolation, the more successful we'll be in reducing violence, which, started to happen after Nicole was murdered. Much more conversation, much more awareness. I think some of the stigma is gone. We have more comprehensive services. The Family Justice Center movement, happened after, in the late 90s, early 2000s. The Violence Against Women Act was passed. I think there's more of a public outcry when public figures get engage in violent behavior. That was not happening at the time that OJ was charged with this. And at the same time, it's not enough. We have to continue to be vigilant. Some of the things on the horizon for us is men have to get involved in this work, and we have to make a place for them to get involved. They need to teach other men about healthy masculinity and how to hold each other accountable.
Do you find many men contacting you because they're victims of abuse?
We do have a rising number of men who have been victimized and do call us, and we help them. We try to help them in the same way that we help women. We, up until now, have not sheltered men. We will be doing that in the fall. I think as a community, as a culture, we need to give men permission to have their own humanity, their own emotions, and make it safe for them to come forward. And I think men have a role to play in that.
And finally, let's give that phone number again. If you think you are a victim,
call our hotline, 414-933-2722. And I would say there are people who care about you in your life that are wanting and willing to help if you reach out to them. And I would say keep reaching out until you find that right person who can help you, who can hear you, and help you move forward.